The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Apache sat on the old brown couch, his baby daughter sleeping against his chest. Her tiny breaths were the only sound in the room. 3 days. It had been 3 days since everything fell apart. He looked down at little Maya's face. She had her mother's nose. That small, perfect nose that he used to kiss every morning. Now every time he looked at his daughter, he saw his wife. And it hurt. It hurt so much he could barely breathe. The funeral was yesterday. Apache couldn't remember much about it. People came. They said things. They hugged him. Someone brought flowers. But it all felt like a dream. A terrible dream he couldn't wake up from. He kept thinking his wife would walk through the door any minute, laughing about some silly joke. But she wouldn't. She was gone. Apache hadn't eaten since the funeral. Maybe even before that. He couldn't remember. Food didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except the tiny baby in his arms who needed him. But how could he take care of her when he could barely take care of himself? The doctors said it was complications. That word kept spinning in his head. Complications. His wife had given birth to Maya 3 months ago. Everything seemed fine at first. They came home from the hospital, tired but happy. New parents, ready to start their life together. But then his wife started feeling weak. She said she was just tired. New mothers are always tired, right? That's what everyone said. But it got worse. She couldn't get out of bed some days. Apache took time off work to help with the baby. They went back to the hospital. The doctors ran tests. They said something about an infection that wasn't caught in time. Something that spread. Apache didn't understand all the medical words. He just knew that one day he was holding his wife's hand in the hospital bed, and the next day, she was gone. Just like that. 26 years old and she was gone. Apache looked around the apartment. Dirty dishes sat in the sink. Baby clothes were scattered on the floor. Bills were stacked on the kitchen counter, unopened. The trash can was overflowing. He knew he should clean up. He knew he should do something. But every time he tried to move, his body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Maya stirred in his arms and made a small sound. Apache gently rocked her, the way his wife used to. She had been so good with the baby. Natural, like she was born to be a mother. Apache felt clumsy and scared. What if he dropped her? What if he did something wrong? His wife always knew what to do when Maya cried. She knew if the baby was hungry or tired or needed a diaper change. Apache was still learning. He got up slowly and walked to the kitchen. His legs felt weak. When was the last time he drank water? He couldn't remember that either. He opened the refrigerator. Almost empty. A half-empty carton of milk that was probably bad by now. Some leftover takeout from before his wife went to the hospital. A few eggs. That was it. Apache opened the cabinet where they kept the baby formula. 3 bottles left. 3. That would last maybe 2 days if he was careful. After that, what would he do? He had spent almost all their savings on the funeral. His boss had been understanding about the time off, but Apache hadn't been back to work yet. No work meant no money. And no money meant no formula. No diapers. No anything. He walked to the bedroom where Maya's crib was. His wife had picked out that crib. She had been so excited measuring the space, choosing the right color. Soft yellow, she said, because it's happy. Apache laid Maya down gently in the crib. The baby didn't wake up. She was a good sleeper, thankfully. That was one thing that wasn't a problem. Apache sat on the edge of the bed he used to share with his wife. Her pillow still smelled like her shampoo. Lavender. She always used lavender shampoo because she said it helped her relax. Apache picked up the pillow and held it close. The tears came then, hard and fast. He buried his face in the pillow so Maya wouldn't hear him cry. Why did this happen? They had been so careful. They went to every doctor's appointment. They did everything right. His wife took her vitamins, ate healthy food, rested when she could. They had plans. So many plans. They were going to take Maya to the park when she got older. They were going to teach her to ride a bike. They were going to watch her grow up together. Now it was just him. And he didn't know if he could do this alone. Apache's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He ignored it. It had been buzzing for days. His mother called from across the country. His sister texted. Friends from work sent messages. He couldn't talk to any of them. What would he say? That he was drowning? That he was scared? That he looked at his beautiful daughter and felt guilty for not feeling more joy? He loved Maya. Of course he did. She was part of him and part of his wife. She was everything good in his life right now. But every time he looked at her, he also felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. How could he raise a child alone? He was a construction worker. He worked long hours. Who would watch Maya while he worked? Daycare cost money he didn't have. His family lived too far away to help regularly. His wife's parents had died years ago before they even met. She had been alone in the world. Except for a few cousins, she didn't talk too much. That's why she and Apache had connected so deeply. They both understood what it meant to build your own family. And now that family was broken. Apache wiped his eyes and stood up. He walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the man staring back. His eyes were red and swollen. His face was covered in stubble. His hair was messy. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. He turned on the faucet and splashed cold water on his face. The shock of it helped a little. He needed to pull himself together. For Maya. She needed him to be strong. She needed formula and diapers and a father who could function. But as Apache stood there, water dripping from his face, he wondered how much longer he could keep pretending to be strong, how much longer before he completely fell apart. He had never felt so alone in his entire life. And the scariest part was, he didn't know if he could keep going. Maya started crying in the other room. Apache took a deep breath and went to her. This is what life was now, just getting through each moment one at a time. He picked up his daughter and held her close, whispering that everything would be okay. He didn't believe it, but he had to say it anyway, for her sake. And maybe somehow, for his own. 5 days had passed since the funeral, or was it 6? Apache had lost count. The days blended together into one long, exhausting nightmare. He would sleep for an hour, wake up when Maya cried, feed her, change her, then stare at the ceiling until she cried again. Time had no meaning anymore. The apartment looked worse now. Much worse. Apache hadn't taken out the trash. He hadn't washed dishes. Clean clothes were mixed with dirty ones on the bedroom floor because he couldn't remember which was which. The place smelled bad, but he was too tired to care. Maya was down to her last container of formula. Apache had been stretching it out, making the bottles smaller than they should be. He knew that was wrong. He knew babies needed proper nutrition. But what choice did he have? The formula was almost gone, and he had $12 in his bank account. $12. That wouldn't even buy one container. He had checked his wallet yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, found some loose change in the couch cushions, counted it 3 times, hoping somehow the amount would change. $2.37. That plus the 12 in his account gave him less than $15 total. Apache sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. His boss had sent an email asking when he'd be back to work. The construction project was behind schedule. They needed him. Apache knew he should go back. They needed the money desperately. But how could he leave Maya? He didn't have anyone to watch her, and daycare required deposits, forms, waiting lists, things he didn't have the energy or money to deal with. He started to type a response to his boss, then stopped. What could he say? His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long time before he just closed the laptop. He'd deal with it later. Everything could wait until later. The refrigerator was completely empty now except for a bottle of ketchup and some baking soda. Apache had eaten the last of the eggs 2 days ago. Or was it 3? He couldn't remember that either. His stomach had stopped growling. That probably wasn't a good sign. He'd read somewhere that when you stop feeling hungry, it means your body is shutting down. But he couldn't think about that now. Maya started fussing in her bouncer seat. Apache looked at the clock. 4 in the afternoon. Time for her bottle. He stood up too quickly and had to grab the counter as the room spun around him. Black spots danced in his vision. When was the last time he drank water? Yesterday? He turned on the tap and drank straight from it, the water splashing on his shirt. It helped a little. He made Maya's bottle using less formula powder than he should. The mixture looked too thin, too watery. Maya drank it anyway. Her small hands wrapped around the bottle. Apache watched her and felt his heart breaking all over again. This wasn't fair to her. She deserved better than this. Better than a father who couldn't even feed her properly. When Maya finished eating, Apache picked her up and walked around the small apartment. This was their routine now. Walking in circles from the living room to the kitchen to the bedroom and back. Sometimes Maya would fall asleep during these walks. Sometimes she'd just look around with her big eyes taking in the world she'd been born into. Apache's phone rang. His mother again. He let it go to voicemail just like all the other times. She'd left 7 messages. His sister left 4. A few friends from work had called too. He couldn't talk to them. They'd ask questions. They'd want to know how he was doing. And if he started talking, he might tell them the truth. That he was failing, that he couldn't do this, that he was scared every single minute of every single day. Pride. That's what was stopping him from picking up the phone. Stupid pride. Apache had always been independent, always handled his own problems. His father had taught him that. A man takes care of his family, his father used to say. A man doesn't ask for handouts. But his father had never been in a situation like this. His father had never been a widower at 28 with a baby, and no money and no idea what to do. Maya fell asleep against his shoulder. Apache kept walking anyway. If he stopped moving, he'd have to think. And thinking was dangerous. When he thought too much, dark ideas crept into his mind. Ideas about how everyone might be better off without him. How Maya deserved parents who had their lives together. How maybe he should call child services and let them find her a real home. But then Maya would make a small sound in her sleep, and Apache would push those thoughts away. She was his daughter. His and his wife's. He couldn't give up on her. His wife wouldn't want that. He finally sat down on the couch, still holding Maya. The TV remote was on the coffee table, but he didn't turn it on. Couldn't stand the noise. Couldn't stand the happy commercials showing perfect families with their perfect lives. Instead, he just sat there in the quiet apartment, listening to Maya breathe. The mail slot in the door rattled. Apache watched as envelopes slid through and fell on the floor. More bills, probably. The rent was due next week. He'd gotten a notice from the landlord 3 days ago. Pay or get out. Apache didn't have the rent. Didn't have anything close to it. But he couldn't think about that right now either. Evening came. The apartment got darker, but Apache didn't turn on the lights. Sitting in the dim light felt easier somehow, less real, like if he couldn't see the mess around him, it didn't exist. Maya woke up and needed another bottle. The last bottle. Apache made it carefully, using the very last of the formula. He shook every bit of powder out of the container, trying to make it enough. This was it. After this bottle, there was nothing. Maya would be hungry tomorrow, and he had nothing to give her. The thought made him feel sick. What kind of father lets his baby go hungry? What kind of man can't even provide basic food for his child? Apache fed Maya the last bottle, and she drank it slowly, like she knew it had to last. When she finished, he burped her gently and held her close. She grabbed his finger with her tiny hand and held on tight. That's what babies do. They hold on. They trust that the adults around them will keep them safe and fed and warm. But Apache was failing at all of that. He looked around the dark apartment and felt completely hopeless. Tomorrow would come and he'd have no formula, no food for himself, no money, no plan, just a hungry baby and a father who didn't know what to do next. Maybe he should call his mother. Maybe he should swallow his pride and ask for help. But his mother lived across the country. She couldn't get here until tomorrow at the earliest. And even then, what could she do? Send money she probably didn't have. His family wasn't rich. They got by, but just barely. Apache's eyes filled with tears again. He was so tired of crying, tired of feeling weak and scared and useless. His wife had been the strong one. She would have known what to do. She would have made a plan, figured things out. But she was gone and Apache was drowning. Maya yawned and closed her eyes, drifting back to sleep in his arms. At least she could still sleep. At least she didn't understand yet how bad things were. Apache kissed the top of her head and made a silent promise. Tomorrow he'd figure something out. Tomorrow he'd find a way, he had to, for her. But deep down he didn't believe it. Tomorrow felt impossible. And the day after that felt even worse. Apache woke up on the couch, his neck stiff from sleeping in an awkward position. Morning light streamed through the dirty windows. Maya was in her bouncer seat next to him, awake and looking around. She wasn't crying yet, but she would be soon. She always cried when she was hungry, and she was definitely going to be hungry. Apache sat up slowly. His head pounded. The room spun for a moment before settling. He hadn't eaten anything yesterday, or the day before. He'd lost track of when his last meal was. His body felt strange, like it belonged to someone else, light and heavy at the same time. He picked up Maya and held her close. She made happy baby sounds, not knowing that her father had no idea how to feed her today. Apache walked to the kitchen and opened the empty formula container one more time, tilting it upside down. A tiny bit of powder fell out. Maybe enough for half a bottle. That was it. That was all they had. The reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the chest. His baby was going to go hungry, and there was nothing he could do about it. He had failed at the most basic job of being a parent, keeping your child fed. Apache mixed the tiny bit of formula with water and gave the bottle to Maya. She drank it fast, finishing in minutes. Then she looked at him with those big eyes, expecting more. But there was no more. Apache felt tears building up again, but he forced them back. He had to stay calm, had to think clearly. Money. He needed money fast. Apache went to the bedroom and started searching. He pulled open drawers looking for anything valuable he could sell. His wife's jewelry box sat on the dresser. He opened it with shaking hands. Inside was the necklace he'd given her for their first anniversary. A small silver pendant with a tiny diamond. Nothing expensive, but it meant everything to them. Apache held the necklace for a long time. Could he really sell this? It was the last piece of his wife he had besides Maya. But Maya needed food. That was more important than any necklace. His wife would have agreed. She would have sold it herself if she were here. He put the necklace in his pocket and kept searching, found 6 quarters in an old jacket, a $5 bill and a pair of jeans he hadn't worn in months, more loose change in various pockets. He gathered it all and counted. $7.50 plus the necklace. The pawn shop was 8 blocks away. Apache had walked past it 100 times but never been inside. He put Maya in her stroller and headed out. It was the first time he'd left the apartment since the funeral. The fresh air hit him like a wall. The world looked too bright, too loud, too normal. People walked by living their regular lives, not knowing that his world had ended. The stroller wheel squeaked as they walked. Maya looked around at everything, fascinated by the cars and trees and people. She didn't know they were on a desperate mission just to survive another day. Apache envied her innocence. The pawn shop smelled like old leather and dust. A man behind the counter looked up as Apache walked in. He had gray hair and wore thick glasses. Apache approached the counter, pulling out the necklace with trembling hands. "How much can I get for this?" His voice came out rough. He hadn't spoken to another person in days. The man took the necklace and examined it with a small magnifying glass. He turned it over, checked the clasp, held it up to the light. Apache's heart pounded. "Please let it be enough, please." $15, the man said, setting it down. $15. That was it. For something his wife wore every day. For something that meant the world to them. But Apache didn't argue. Couldn't argue. He needed that money. "Okay," he whispered. The man filled out some paperwork and handed Apache $15 in cash. Apache took it and left quickly, feeling like he'd just betrayed his wife's memory. But Maya needed formula. That was what mattered. They went straight to the corner store. Apache grabbed 2 small containers of formula. The cheapest brand they had. $23 total. He added the cash from his pocket. $22.50. Not enough. He put 1 container back and grabbed the smallest size instead. $16. He could afford that. At the register, the cashier rang it up. Apache handed over the money, his hands shaking. The cashier gave him back $6.50. That was all the money they had in the world now. $6.50. Maya started crying in the stroller. Apache paid and rushed outside. He mixed a bottle right there on the sidewalk, not caring who saw. Maya drank it eagerly, her cries stopping immediately. Apache watched her drink and felt a mix of relief and dread. This small container would last maybe 3 days if he was careful. Then what? They walked back to the apartment slowly. Apache's legs felt weak. He needed food too. But the $6 had to go toward more formula when this ran out. He could survive without eating a bit longer. Maya couldn't. Back inside, Apache sat on the couch with Maya in his arms. The apartment felt even more depressing after being outside. The walls seemed to close in. Apache looked around at the mess, the unpaid bills, the empty refrigerator. This wasn't a home anymore. It was just a place where they were slowly falling apart. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss. Need to know if you're coming back. Project deadline is next week. Call me. Apache stared at the message. He knew he should respond. Should tell his boss he'd be back Monday. But Monday was 4 days away. How could he go back to work with no one to watch Maya? How could he focus on construction when his whole life was collapsing? He set the phone down without responding. Maya fell asleep after her bottle. Apache laid her in the crib and went to the bathroom. He looked at himself in the mirror again. He looked worse than before. His cheeks were hollow. His skin was pale. He looked sick. He probably was sick. You can't go this long without eating and be okay. Apache splashed water on his face and went back to the living room. He sat down and tried to think of a plan. Any plan. He could call his mother. Finally admit he needed help. But the shame of it made him feel sick. He'd always been the one who had it together. The responsible one. How could he tell his family he couldn't even feed his own child? He could apply for government assistance. Food stamps, welfare, whatever they called it. But that took time. Applications and appointments and proof of everything. He didn't have time. Maya needed food now. Not in 2 weeks after the paperwork went through. He could ask his neighbors for help. But Apache barely knew them. They'd seen each other in the hallways. Nodded hello but never really talked. How do you knock on a stranger's door and ask for money? The thought of it made Apache want to disappear. Dark thoughts crept in again. Maybe Maya would be better off with a different family, a family with money and food and 2 parents. There were people out there desperate to adopt babies. Good people who could give her everything he couldn't. The thought made him feel sick, but it also made a terrible kind of sense. Apache walked to Maya's crib and looked down at her sleeping face. She was so perfect, so innocent. She deserved everything good in this world. And what was he giving her? An empty apartment, a depressed father, and barely enough food to survive. But she was his daughter. His and his wife's. The last piece of the woman he loved. How could he give that up? How could he live with himself if he did? Apache sank to the floor next to the crib, his back against the wall. He pulled his knees to his chest and put his head down. He was so tired. Not just physically tired, but tired of everything. Tired of trying. Tired of failing. Tired of being strong when he felt so weak. He didn't know how much more of this he could take. How much longer before he completely broke. The formula would run out again. The rent was due. His boss was losing patience. And Apache was out of options. For the first time since his wife died, Apache thought seriously about just giving up. Not on Maya, never on Maya, but on himself. On this impossible situation. Maybe it was time to admit defeat, to ask for help, no matter how much it hurt his pride, or to make the hardest decision of his life and find Maya a better home. He sat there on the floor for a long time, watching his daughter sleep, and wondering if tomorrow would bring any answers. Or if tomorrow would just bring more impossible choices and more pain. Either way, something had to change. They couldn't keep going like this. Something had to give. Apache was sitting on the floor leaning against the couch when he heard it. 3 solid knocks on the door. He froze. Nobody ever knocked on his door. The landlord always slipped notices under it. The mail carrier never needed a signature. Who could it be? More knocking. Louder this time. More insistent. Apache's first thought was to ignore it. Pretend he wasn't home. Maybe it was the landlord coming for rent money he didn't have. Or worse, maybe someone from child services. Had one of his neighbors called them? Had they noticed something wrong? His heart started racing. The knocking continued. Whoever it was wasn't giving up. Apache slowly got to his feet. His legs felt shaky. He walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman stood there. Older, maybe in her 60s. She had short gray hair and wore a simple blue jacket. She was holding several bags. Grocery bags from the look of it. Apache didn't recognize her. His mind raced through possibilities. Was she selling something? Collecting donations? Wrong apartment? He opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain lock on. The woman smiled at him. It was a kind smile, the kind that reached her eyes. Apache Morrison? she asked. Apache's blood ran cold. She knew his name. Who are you? His voice came out more defensive than he meant it to. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm from St. Mary's Community Outreach Program. She held up the bag slightly. I heard about your wife. I'm so sorry for your loss. May I come in? These bags are getting heavy. Apache stood there confused. St. Mary's? He didn't know any St. Mary's. He and his wife weren't religious. They'd never gone to church. Why would a church be at his door? I think you have the wrong person, Apache said, starting to close the door. Wait, Margaret said quickly. Your wife was on our prayer list. Someone at the hospital where she passed mentioned your situation to our outreach coordinator. We help families in crisis. Please, just let me put these bags down and I'll explain everything. Apache hesitated. This could be some kind of scam. But the woman looked harmless. And those bags did look heavy. Against his better judgment, he unhooked the chain and opened the door wider. Margaret stepped inside and immediately headed for the kitchen like she'd been there before. She set the bags on the counter and started unpacking. Apache watched stunned as she pulled out container after container. Formula. At least 6 containers of formula. Then diapers. A huge box of diapers. Then came the food. Fresh vegetables, bread, canned soup, pasta sauce, milk, eggs, cheese, chicken. What is this? Apache finally found his voice. I can't accept this. I don't even know you. Margaret kept unpacking, not stopping. You can accept it, and you will. When did you last eat? Apache didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He watched as more food appeared. Cereal, coffee, sugar, rice, beans. Things he hadn't been able to afford in weeks. That's what I thought, Margaret said, glancing at him. She opened his refrigerator and started putting things inside. She didn't comment on how empty it was. Didn't say anything about the smell or the mess. She just worked efficiently, finding space for everything. Maya started crying from the bedroom. Apache turned to go to her, but Margaret held up her hand. You sit down. Let me get the baby. You don't have to, Apache started. I know I don't have to, but I'm going to anyway. Sit. Her voice was firm but not unkind. The kind of voice that was used to being obeyed. Apache sat at the kitchen table, too overwhelmed to argue. He heard Margaret talking softly in the bedroom. Oh, there you are. What a beautiful baby. Yes, you are. Let's change this diaper, shall we? Apache put his head in his hands. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Strangers didn't just show up with food and help. Things like this didn't happen in real life. He must be hallucinating from not eating. That had to be it. But when he looked up, Margaret was walking back into the kitchen carrying Maya like she'd done it 1,000 times before. The baby had stopped crying and was looking at Margaret with curiosity. She needs a bottle, Margaret said, already moving to the counter. She found the formula Apache had just bought and started mixing it. When did she last eat? A few hours ago, Apache said quietly. Margaret nodded and finished making the bottle. She tested the temperature on her wrist, then sat down across from Apache and started feeding Maya. The baby drank eagerly, her eyes closing in contentment. Apache watched them and felt tears building up. He tried to hold them back, but they came anyway. Silent tears running down his face. He was too tired to even feel embarrassed. Margaret looked at him with gentle eyes. How long has it been since you've eaten? Apache wiped his face with his sleeve. I don't know. A few days. Maybe more. And when did you sleep last? Really sleep? Apache shook his head. I sleep when she sleeps. Little bits here and there. Margaret looked around the apartment, taking in the mess, the bills, the exhaustion written all over Apache's face. She didn't judge. She just nodded like she understood, like she'd seen this before. I'm going to heat up some soup for you, she said, still feeding Maya. You need to eat. You can't take care of this baby if you don't take care of yourself first. Why are you doing this? Apache asked. His voice cracked. You don't know me. I never went to your church. I can't pay you back. Margaret smiled softly. We're not asking for payment. That's not how this works. Your wife's name came up on our prayer list. Someone who works at the hospital is part of our congregation. They mentioned you had a new baby and were alone. That's all we needed to know. She burped Maya gently and continued. We have a program for families in crisis. Lost jobs, medical emergencies, deaths in the family. We help where we can. Food supplies sometimes help with bills. Whatever people need to get through the hard times. Apache couldn't wrap his head around it. But you don't even know if I'm a good person. What if I'm lying? What if I'm just trying to get free stuff? Margaret laughed, not meanly, but like she'd heard this question before. Are you lying? No, but then there's no problem. Look, Apache, I'm going to be straight with you. You look terrible. This apartment is a mess. Your baby is clean and fed, which tells me you're putting her first, but you're clearly falling apart. You need help. We're offering it. It's that simple. She stood up, still holding Maya, and went to the stove. With one hand, she opened a container of what looked like homemade soup and poured it into a pot to heat. Apache watched her move around his kitchen like she belonged there. It was the strangest feeling. A stranger in his home, but somehow it didn't feel invasive. It felt like relief. The soup heated quickly. Margaret poured it into a bowl and set it in front of Apache with a spoon and some bread. Eat, she said. It wasn't a request. Apache picked up the spoon. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped it. The first spoonful of soup was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted. Warm, salty, real. His body responded immediately, reminding him how hungry he actually was. He ate slowly at first, then faster. He couldn't stop. The soup was gone in minutes. He tore off pieces of bread and ate those too. Margaret watched with satisfaction. She'd moved to the couch and was rocking Maya gently. The baby had fallen asleep in her arms. There's more if you want it, she said. Apache shook his head. His stomach was already cramping from eating too fast after so long without food, but he felt more awake than he had in days. More human. Thank you, he whispered. It seemed like such a small thing to say for what she'd done, but it was all he had. You're welcome, Margaret said. She looked at the sleeping baby in her arms. She's beautiful. What's her name? Maya. That's a lovely name. Margaret stood up carefully and brought Maya to Apache. She placed the baby in his arms. I'm going to come back tomorrow. I'll bring more supplies and we'll talk about what else you need. There are programs that can help. Resources you probably don't know about. But for tonight you have food and formula. That's a start. She gathered her empty bags and headed for the door. Apache stood up, still holding Maya. Margaret, he called out. She turned back. Why do you do this, really? Margaret's expression softened. Because 30 years ago someone did it for me. When my husband died and I had 2 little kids and no idea how to go on, a stranger showed up with food and help just like I did today. She told me that someday I'd do the same for someone else. That's how we get through the hard times, Apache. We hold each other up. And with that she left. The door closed softly behind her. Apache stood in his kitchen holding his sleeping daughter, surrounded by more food than they'd had in weeks. He looked around the apartment that had felt like a prison just an hour ago. It still looked the same, still messy and overwhelming, but something felt different. For the first time since his wife died, Apache felt a tiny spark of something he'd thought was gone forever. Hope. Just a little bit. Just enough to make him think that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Margaret came back the next morning, just like she promised. Apache had barely slept, half convinced that yesterday was a dream. But when he opened the door, there she was again. This time she brought another woman with her. This is Linda, Margaret introduced. She's one of our volunteers. We're going to help you clean up a bit if that's okay. Apache wanted to say no, wanted to tell them he could handle it himself. But looking at the state of his apartment, he knew that was a lie. Okay, he said quietly, stepping aside to let them in. The 2 women got to work immediately. Linda started on the dishes while Margaret gathered up the trash. They moved like a well-practiced team, efficient but respectful. They didn't throw anything away without asking first. Didn't invade his privacy. Just cleaned the basic mess that had piled up. Apache tried to help, but Margaret waved him away. You take care of the baby. Let us handle this. So Apache sat on the couch with Maya, watching these 2 strangers restore order to his chaos. It was embarrassing and humbling and somehow comforting all at the same time. He'd been alone for so long, trying to handle everything by himself. Having help felt strange, but it also felt like breathing after being underwater too long. Linda found clean bottles and washed them. Margaret tackled the pile of laundry, separating it into loads. They worked mostly in silence, occasionally chatting with each other about ordinary things. The weather. A recipe Linda wanted to try. Normal conversation that made the apartment feel less heavy. After an hour, the kitchen was clean. The trash was out. The floor was visible again. Apache looked around, almost not recognizing his own home. Better? Margaret asked, wiping her hands on a towel. Apache nodded, not trusting his voice. Linda left to run the laundry down to the building's machines, and Margaret sat down across from Apache. She pulled out a folder from her bag. I want to talk to you about some resources. Have you applied for any assistance programs? Apache shook his head. I don't even know what's available. Okay, we'll figure it out together. Margaret opened the folder and pulled out several papers. First, there's WIC. That's a nutrition program for women, infants, and children. You qualify because of Maya. They'll provide formula, baby food as she gets older, and some other basics. There's also SNAP, which most people call food stamps. That'll help with your groceries, she continued, listing programs Apache had never heard of. Temporary assistance for needy families, childcare subsidies, healthcare programs. Each one sounded too good to be true, but Margaret had all the paperwork right there. This is overwhelming, Apache admitted. I don't know how to do any of this. That's why I'm here, Margaret said simply. We'll take it step by step. Today we'll just fill out the initial applications. The rest we can do over the next few days. They spent the next 2 hours going through paperwork. Margaret was patient, explaining each question, helping Apache find the documents he needed. Birth certificates, proof of address, pay stubs from before his wife died. It was tedious work, but Margaret made it manageable. When they finished, Margaret packed up the papers. I'll drop these off at the office this afternoon. You should hear back within a week or two. A week or two? Apache felt panic rising. But I need help now. I know. That's why we're here. Margaret smiled. The church fund can help bridge the gap. We can provide groceries, formula, diapers, whatever you need until the official programs kick in. You're not going to fall through the cracks, Apache. We won't let that happen. Apache felt his eyes getting wet again. He was so tired of crying, but the relief was overwhelming. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to thank me. Just accept the help. That's all we ask. Margaret stood up. Now, I want to talk to you about something else. When was the last time you left this apartment? Besides the funeral? Apache thought about it. Yesterday, when I went to the pawn shop. Margaret's expression shifted. The pawn shop? Apache looked down, ashamed. I sold my wife's necklace. For formula money. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out some cash. What's the name of the pawn shop? What? No, I can't. What's the name? Her voice was gentle but firm, Apache told her. Margaret wrote it down. I'll see what I can do. They usually hold items for 30 days. Maybe we can get it back. You don't have to do that, Apache said, but his voice was thick with emotion. That necklace meant everything to him. I know I don't have to, but I want to. Margaret headed for the door, then turned back. One more thing. There's a grief support group that meets at the church on Wednesday evenings. It's specifically for people who've lost spouses. I think it might help. Apache bristled at that. I don't need therapy. It's not therapy. It's just people who understand what you're going through, people who've been where you are. Margaret's voice was soft. You don't have to go, but the option is there if you want it. After she left, Apache sat with Maya and thought about everything. A week ago, he'd been completely alone, convinced he was going to lose everything. Now he had a refrigerator full of food, a clean apartment, and people who cared what happened to him. It was almost too much to process. Linda came back with the clean laundry. She folded it neatly and put it away, showing Apache where everything was. Margaret told me about the support group, she said casually. My husband died 5 years ago. That group saved my life. Not right away. Took me 3 months before I had the courage to walk through those doors. But when I did, it changed everything. Apache looked at her. Linda was probably in her 50s with laugh lines around her eyes and a warmth about her that made you feel comfortable. She didn't look like someone who'd been through terrible grief. But then again, maybe that was the point. What's it like? He asked. Honest, Linda said. Everyone there has lost someone. There's no judgment, no pressure to be strong or to be over it. You can cry, or you can be angry, or you can just sit there and listen, whatever you need. Apache considered this. The idea of sharing his pain with strangers felt impossible. But then again, a few days ago, the idea of accepting help felt impossible too. Maybe he was wrong about a lot of things. Over the next few days, Margaret and Linda came by regularly. Sometimes together, sometimes separately. They brought more supplies, helped Apache organize his bills, set up a payment plan with his landlord, made calls to his boss on his behalf, explaining the situation and negotiating more time off. Margaret even went to the pawn shop and bought back his wife's necklace. She handed it to Apache without ceremony. "This belongs with you," she said. Apache held the necklace and broke down completely. Not quiet tears this time, but deep, body-shaking sobs. All the grief and fear and exhaustion he'd been holding in came pouring out. Margaret just sat with him, one hand on his shoulder, letting him cry. "I miss her so much," Apache gasped between sobs. "I don't know how to do this without her. Every time I look at Maya, I see her face, and it hurts. It hurts so much." "I know," Margaret said softly. "I know it does." "I feel guilty," Apache continued. "Maya is beautiful and perfect, and I should be happy. But I'm not. I'm just scared and sad all the time. What kind of father does that make me?" "It makes you human," Margaret said. "You're grieving, Apache. That's normal. That's healthy. You don't have to be happy right now. You just have to survive, one day at a time." Apache wiped his face with his hands. "I wanted to give up. Before you came, I was thinking about calling child services and giving Maya away. Letting someone else raise her. Someone better than me." Margaret didn't look shocked or disappointed. She just nodded. "Dark thoughts come when we're in dark places. But you didn't do it. You held on. And now things are starting to get better. Not perfect, not easy, but better." She was right. Things were better. Apache was eating regularly now. He was sleeping a bit more. The apartment was clean. Maya had plenty of formula and diapers. The crushing weight of immediate survival had lifted just enough for Apache to breathe. But the grief was still there. The loneliness, the fear. Those things didn't disappear with a full refrigerator. Margaret seemed to understand that. "Come to the support group," she said. "This Wednesday. Just try it once. If you hate it, you never have to go back. But give it a chance." Apache looked at his wife's necklace in his hand. Then he looked at Maya, sleeping peacefully in her bouncer. He thought about how close he'd come to losing everything. How these strangers had pulled him back from the edge. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll try it." Margaret smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Good, that's really good, Apache." Wednesday came faster than Apache expected. He was nervous all day, almost talking himself out of going a dozen times. But when the evening arrived, he bundled Maya up and took her to St. Mary's Church. The support group met in a small room with chairs arranged in a circle. There were about 8 people there, ranging from young to old. Margaret was there too, sitting off to the side. She gave Apache an encouraging nod. A man who introduced himself as Robert led the group. He was probably in his 40s, with kind eyes and a calm voice. "We start each meeting by checking in. Just share your name and how you're doing today. You can pass if you want." People started sharing. A woman whose husband died from cancer. A younger man whose wife died in a car accident. An older woman whose partner of 30 years passed from a heart attack. Each story was different. Apache kept going to the support group. Every Wednesday evening, he'd put Maya in her carrier and walk to the church. At first, he mostly listened. Hearing other people's stories helped him feel less alone, but he still wasn't ready to fully open up about everything he was feeling. Margaret continued visiting regularly, though less frequently now. She'd check in, bring some groceries, make sure Apache was doing okay. The assistance programs had finally come through. Apache was getting WIC benefits for Maya and SNAP for himself. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to keep them fed. The apartment stayed clean now. Apache had gotten into a routine. Feed Maya, change her, play with her a little. Do dishes, pick up the living room. Small tasks that made him feel like less of a failure. His boss had given him another week before he needed to come back to work. Apache knew that deadline was coming fast. One Wednesday evening at the support group, Robert asked a question that hit Apache hard. "What's the thing you're most afraid to feel?" People around the circle shared. Fear, anger, relief. That last one shocked Apache. Relief? Who feels relieved when someone dies? But then a woman named Patricia explained. Her husband had been sick for years before he died. The last months were awful. She'd been exhausted, watching him suffer, feeling helpless. When he finally passed, part of her felt relief that his suffering was over, and then she felt guilty for feeling relieved. "It's like I'm not allowed to feel anything but sad," Patricia said, wiping her eyes. "But I feel so many things. I'm angry at him for leaving me. I'm relieved I don't have to watch him suffer anymore. I'm guilty for both of those feelings, and under all of it, I'm just tired. Apache felt something crack inside him. When it was his turn, words started pouring out before he could stop them. "I'm angry," he said. His voice shook. "I'm so angry at my wife, and I hate myself for it. She didn't choose to die. It's not her fault. But I'm angry anyway. We had plans. We were supposed to raise Maya together. She was supposed to be here and she's not, and I'm left dealing with everything alone." Maya started fussing in his arms. Apache automatically started rocking her, but he kept talking. The words had been trapped inside him for weeks, and now they were flooding out. "I'm angry at the doctors who didn't catch the infection sooner. I'm angry at my boss for pressuring me to come back to work. I'm angry at myself for not being stronger, for almost giving up. I'm angry at the world for being so unfair." His voice broke. "And I feel guilty every single day for being angry. Because my wife is dead and I should just be sad. But I'm not. I'm furious." The room was quiet. Apache expected judgment, expected people to tell him he shouldn't feel that way. But instead, heads nodded around the circle. Understanding filled their faces. "Anger is part of grief," Robert said gently. "It's normal. You're not a bad person for feeling it." "It doesn't feel normal," Apache said. "It feels wrong. Maya deserves a father who's grateful to have her, not one who's angry all the time." "Can I tell you something?" Linda spoke up from across the circle. Apache had been surprised to see her there the first week, but she explained she still came to help facilitate sometimes. "When my husband died, I was angry for a year, maybe longer. I was angry at everyone and everything. And you know what my kids needed during that time? They needed me to be honest about it. Not perfect, just honest." She leaned forward in her chair. "Maya is 3 months old. She doesn't need you to be happy right now. She needs you to be present, to feed her and hold her and keep her safe. You're doing that. The rest will come." Apache felt tears streaming down his face again. He was so tired of crying, but Linda's words reached something deep inside him. Maybe he didn't have to be perfect. Maybe surviving was enough for now. After the meeting, Margaret pulled him aside. "That was brave, what you shared tonight." "Didn't feel brave," Apache muttered. "Felt like falling apart." "Sometimes falling apart is the bravest thing we can do," Margaret said. She hesitated, then continued. "I want to tell you something I've never told the group. When my husband died, I had thoughts about hurting myself. Dark thoughts. I was in so much pain and I didn't see how I could keep going." Apache looked at her, shocked. Margaret, who seemed so strong and put together, had felt that way? "A stranger helped me," Margaret continued. "An older woman from a church I'd never been to. She showed up with food just like I did for you, and she told me something I'll never forget. She said that grief tricks us into thinking the pain will last forever. But it won't, it changes. It gets different. Sometimes it gets lighter, sometimes it comes back heavy. But it's not forever." Margaret's eyes were bright with tears. "I'm telling you this because I see you struggling, Apache. I see you trying so hard to hold it together. And I want you to know that it's okay if you can't sometimes. It's okay to fall apart. Just don't stay down there, okay? Let people help you back up." That conversation stayed with Apache for days. He thought about it during Maya's late-night feedings, thought about it while doing dishes, thought about it while staring at his wife's picture on the nightstand. The following week, the grief hit him different than before. He was giving Maya a bath, carefully washing her tiny body when she smiled at him. Just a little smile, probably gas, but it was the first time Apache had seen her smile. And suddenly he was sobbing, not sad tears, different tears. Complicated tears. His wife would never see Maya smile, would never hear her first words or see her first steps. All the moments they'd planned to share were gone. But Apache was here. He got to see those moments. He got to be Maya's parent. It felt like a gift and a tragedy at the same time. Apache called Margaret that night. "I don't know how to feel okay about being happy," he told her. "Maya smiled today and I was happy for a second. Then I felt guilty because my wife will never see her smile." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Your wife would want you to be happy when Maya smiles. She'd want you to enjoy those moments. Feeling joy doesn't mean you love her any less." "How do you know that?" Apache asked. "Because I know what love is. And love wants the people we leave behind to live. Really live. Not just survive, but actually live." Margaret's voice was firm. "Your wife loved you and Maya. She'd want you both to have full lives even without her." Those words settled something in Apache's chest. A permission he didn't know he needed. It was okay to be happy sometimes. It was okay to smile when Maya smiled. It didn't erase his grief or mean he'd forgotten his wife. At the next support group meeting, Apache shared this revelation. "I'm starting to understand that I can hold two feelings at once," he said. "I can be sad my wife is gone and happy my daughter smiled. Both things can be true." Robert nodded approvingly. "That's one of the hardest lessons in grief. Learning that life isn't either or. It's both and." Other people in the group shared similar experiences, moments of laughter that felt wrong at first. Times they forgot about their grief for a few minutes, then felt guilty about forgetting. The room was full of people learning the same difficult lesson. Grief and life had to coexist somehow. Apache's boss called that week. "I need you back next Monday." "I've given you all the time I can." Apache felt panic rise up, but he pushed it down. He talked to Margaret about childcare options. She connected him with a woman from the church who ran a small home daycare. The cost was reasonable, especially with the childcare subsidy he now qualified for. Apache visited and liked her immediately. She was grandmotherly, patient with kids, had years of experience. "I can take Maya," she said after meeting them. "Starting whenever you need, it was all coming together." Apache had food, assistance, childcare support. The pieces were falling into place. So why did he still feel like he was drowning? That night, alone in his apartment after putting Maya to bed, Apache finally let himself break completely. Not the crying he'd done before. This was deeper. This was the grief he'd been holding back because he was too busy surviving to feel it fully. He pulled out his wife's clothes from the closet, buried his face in them, breathing in the fading scent of her. He looked through photos on his phone. Their wedding day. The day they found out they were pregnant. Her holding Maya for the first time in the hospital. Tired but glowing with happiness. Apache lay on the floor of their bedroom and sobbed. Deep, painful sobs that came from somewhere he didn't know existed. He cried for his wife, for Maya growing up without her mother, for himself and the future they'd never have. He cried until he was exhausted, until there were no tears left, and when he finally stopped, something felt different. Lighter, maybe, or just emptier. He'd finally let himself fully feel the loss instead of running from it. The next morning, Margaret called to check on him. "How are you doing?" "I broke last night," Apache admitted. "Just completely fell apart." "Good," Margaret said, surprising him. "Sometimes we need to break before we can start putting ourselves back together." "You've been holding so much, Apache. It had to come out sometime." "I'm going back to work Monday," Apache said. "Maya starts daycare." "I'm terrified." "Of course you are. It's a big step. But you can do this. You've already done the hardest part." "What's the hardest part?" Apache asked. "You survived," Margaret said simply. "You're still here. You didn't give up. Everything else is just details." Apache held the phone and let those words sink in. She was right. He was still here. Monday morning came too fast. Apache stood in the bathroom looking at himself in the mirror. He'd shaved for the first time in weeks, put on clean work clothes. He looked almost normal, but inside his stomach was twisted in knots. Today was the day. Back to work, Maya's first day at daycare. The start of their new normal. Apache picked up Maya and held her close. She was 4 months old now, getting bigger every day. She'd started noticing things more. Would track him with her eyes when he moved around the room. Sometimes she'd grab his finger and hold on tight. "We can do this," he whispered to her. "We have to do this." The daycare provider, Mrs. Rose, lived just 10 blocks away. Apache had visited 3 times already to get Maya comfortable with her. Mrs. Rose had been patient, letting Apache stay as long as he needed. But today he'd have to leave Maya there and go to work. Mrs. Rose answered the door with a warm smile. "Good morning. How are we feeling today?" "Nervous," Apache admitted, stepping inside. The house smelled like breakfast. 2 other children, both toddlers, were playing with blocks in the living room. "That's completely normal," Mrs. Rose said, taking Maya from Apache's arms. The baby went to her easily, which made Apache feel both relieved and a little sad. "We'll have a great day. She'll probably sleep through most of it anyway." Apache had packed everything. Bottles, diapers, extra clothes, her favorite blanket. He'd written down instructions, even though Mrs. Rose had years of experience and didn't need them. He was stalling, and they both knew it. "She'll be fine," Mrs. Rose said gently. "And you can call any time, I mean it. If you need to hear her voice or just want an update, call." Apache nodded, kissed Maya's forehead, and forced himself to leave. Walking to the bus stop felt like the hardest thing he'd ever done. His chest hurt. His eyes burned. But he kept walking. The construction site was loud and busy when he arrived. His co-workers greeted him, some with condolences, others with awkward pats on the shoulder. Nobody quite knew what to say. Apache appreciated the ones who didn't try. His boss, Frank, pulled him aside. "Good to have you back. Take it easy today. Don't push yourself too hard." "I'm fine," Apache said automatically. Frank gave him a look. "You don't have to be fine. Just be here and do what you can." The work was physical and exhausting, which Apache was grateful for. It didn't leave room to think. He focused on measuring, cutting, lifting, building. His body remembered the motions even though his mind felt scattered. By lunch, his muscles ached in a familiar way. He called Mrs. Rose during his break. "How's Maya?" "She's perfect. Took a bottle at 9, played for a bit, now she's sleeping. Haven't heard a peep of fussing." Relief washed over Apache. "Okay, good, that's good. Apache," Mrs. Rose said kindly. "She's okay. You're okay. This is going to work out." He wanted to believe her. The rest of the day passed slowly. Apache's mind kept drifting to Maya. Was she crying? Did she miss him? Was Mrs. Rose really watching her carefully? He knew he was being ridiculous. Mrs. Rose came highly recommended. Margaret had known her for years. But logic didn't stop the worry. When 5 o'clock finally came, Apache rushed to Mrs. Rose's house. He burst through the door, probably looking wild-eyed. Mrs. Rose laughed softly. "She's in the playpen sleeping. Told you she'd be fine." Apache went to Maya and saw her sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling. He picked her up carefully and she barely stirred. The relief was overwhelming. "She did great," Mrs. Rose reported. "Ate all her bottles. Had a couple of good naps. Even gave me some smiles. She's a sweet baby, Apache." "Thank you," Apache said, his voice thick. "Thank you for taking care of her." "It's my pleasure." "Same time tomorrow?" Apache nodded. He could do this. One day down. He could do it again tomorrow. The week started to develop a rhythm. Wake up, feed Maya, get them both ready. Drop her at daycare, work all day, pick her up, come home, dinner, bath time, bedtime. Then do it all again. It was exhausting, but it was manageable. Apache kept going to the support group every Wednesday. Margaret still checked in regularly, though she didn't need to bring supplies anymore. The assistance programs were working. Apache was making his own money again. They weren't comfortable, but they weren't starving either. One evening at the support group, a new person showed up. A young woman, maybe 25, with red eyes and a lost expression Apache recognized. She held a baby carrier with a tiny newborn inside. "This is Rachel," Robert introduced. "Her husband passed away 2 weeks ago." Apache's heart clenched. 2 weeks. That's where he'd been not that long ago. That desperate, dark place where breathing felt impossible. Rachel barely spoke during the meeting. Just sat there crying quietly while others shared. Apache found himself watching her, seeing his own pain reflected back. When the meeting ended, most people filtered out, but Apache stayed. "Rachel?" He approached carefully. "I'm Apache. My wife died 4 months ago, right after our daughter was born." Rachel looked up at him with hollow eyes. "How are you still standing?" Apache almost laughed at that. "Some days I'm not sure I am. But I'm here. And you're here. That counts for something." "I don't know what to do," Rachel whispered. "I can't think. I can't eat. I don't know how to take care of a baby alone." Apache pulled up a chair next to her. 4 months ago, I was sitting in my apartment with no food and no formula and no hope. I'd sold my wife's jewelry to buy baby food. I was thinking about giving my daughter up because I didn't think I could do it. Rachel's eyes widened. "What changed?" "Someone showed up with groceries," Apache said simply. "A stranger who decided to help. And she kept showing up. And she connected me with other people who helped. And slowly things got better." Margaret had been listening from across the room. She came over with her usual warm smile. "Rachel, have you eaten today?" Rachel shook her head. "Let me get you some groceries," Margaret said. "Apache, do you mind staying with her for a few minutes while I make some calls?" Apache sat with Rachel while Margaret made arrangements. He told her about Mrs. Rose's daycare, about the assistance programs, about how impossible everything felt at first, but how small steps made it bearable. "I can't imagine feeling better," Rachel said. "I couldn't either," Apache admitted. "But I do, not all the time. I still have awful days, days where I can barely function, But I also have okay days now. Days where I can actually smile at something. It gets different. Margaret came back with a plan. She'd bring groceries to Rachel tomorrow, would help her apply for assistance, would connect her with resources. The same thing she'd done for Apache. Watching Margaret help Rachel, Apache felt something shift inside him. He'd been so focused on his own survival that he hadn't thought about helping others. But maybe he could. Maybe his experience could mean something to someone else who was drowning. If you need to talk, Apache told Rachel, writing his phone number on a piece of paper. Call me. Anytime. Even at 3 a.m. when the baby won't stop crying and you feel like you can't go on. I'll answer. Rachel took the paper with shaking hands. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Apache smiled, a real smile. Someone did it for me. Now I'm passing it on. After they left, Margaret pulled Apache aside. That was beautiful what you did. Reaching out to her. I remember what it felt like, Apache said. Being that lost. If I can help someone else not feel so alone, I should. Margaret's eyes got misty. You know what this means, right? You're healing. Really healing. You can't pour from an empty cup. The fact that you have something to give means you're filling back up. Apache thought about that. Was he healing? He still missed his wife every day. Still cried sometimes. Still had moments where the grief hit him like a wave. But he was functioning, working, taking care of Maya, even helping someone else. Maybe that was healing. Not forgetting. Not moving on. Just learning to live alongside the grief instead of drowning in it. That weekend, Apache took Maya to the park for the first time. It was a warm day and he pushed her stroller along the paths, watching other families play. A few months ago, seeing happy families would have destroyed him. Now it just made him a little sad. Progress. He found a bench and took Maya out of her stroller, holding her on his lap. She looked around with wide eyes, fascinated by the trees and birds and children running around. Your mom would have loved bringing you here, Apache told her softly. She had this whole list of parks she wanted to visit with you. All the playgrounds in the city. She was going to be the fun mom who pushed you on the swings and helped you climb the jungle gym. Maya grabbed at his hand, and Apache felt tears coming. But they weren't the same desperate tears from before. These were softer. Sad but not hopeless. I'm going to bring you to all those parks, Apache promised. And I'll tell you about your mom. About how brave she was and how much she loved you. You'll know her through my stories. She'll always be part of your life. A woman walking by smiled at them. She's beautiful. How old? 4 months, Apache said. Enjoy every moment. They grow so fast. The woman walked on and Apache held Maya closer. He was enjoying moments now. Not all of them. Not even most of them, but some. And that was more than he thought possible a few months ago. Apache's phone rang. Rachel's name showed on the screen. He answered immediately. Rachel, you okay? I'm sorry to bother you, she said, her voice shaky. I'm having a really hard time. 6 months had passed since Margaret first knocked on Apache's door. 6 months that felt like both a lifetime and a blink. Apache stood in the kitchen of St. Mary's Community Center, chopping vegetables for the weekly meal distribution. Maya was in a portable playpen nearby, playing with soft blocks and babbling to herself. It was a Saturday morning, and Apache had started volunteering here 2 months ago. At first, Margaret had invited him just to visit, to see the operation. But watching people pack meals for families in crisis, Apache felt drawn to help. It felt right somehow. Like closing a circle. Can you grab more potatoes from the storage room? Linda called from across the kitchen. She was making her famous soup again, the same soup that Margaret had brought Apache on that first day. Apache headed to the storage room, passing other volunteers. Some he knew from the support group. Others were just community members who gave their time. Everyone working together, helping people they'd never meet. In the storage room, Apache found the potatoes and also noticed they were low on baby formula. He made a mental note to mention it to Margaret. Formula was always in demand. He knew that better than anyone. When he came back, a new family had arrived at the distribution window. A young father holding a toddler, looking exhausted and worried. Apache recognized that look. He'd worn it himself not that long ago. Margaret was talking to the man, taking down information, assessing what he needed. Apache watched her work with such compassion and efficiency. She'd done this hundreds of times, maybe thousands. Each family got her full attention, her genuine care. After the family left with bags of groceries, Margaret came over to Apache. That man just lost his job. Wife left him. He's trying to figure out how to keep his apartment and feed his son. Sounds familiar, Apache said quietly. Margaret nodded. I thought you might want to talk to him next time he comes. Father to father. Sometimes people need to hear from someone who's been where they are. Apache felt nervous at the idea but also ready. Yeah, I can do that. Maya started fussing and Apache went to pick her up. She was 7 months old now, sitting up on her own, eating solid foods, growing so fast it scared him sometimes. He strapped her into a baby carrier on his chest and went back to chopping vegetables. She liked being close to him while he worked. Robert from the grief support group came into the kitchen carrying boxes of canned goods. Apache, good to see you, man. How's it going? Pretty good, Apache said and realized he meant it. Not perfect. He still had hard days. Still missed his wife with an ache that never fully went away. But he was functioning. Living, not just surviving. I heard you've been helping some of the newer people in group, Robert said. Really making a difference, Apache shrugged, embarrassed. Just trying to help where I can. That's what it's about, Robert said. We've all been in the dark place. Those of us who make it out have a responsibility to reach back and help others up. Rachel walked into the kitchen then, carrying her now 6-month-old son. She looked better than when Apache first met her. Still grieving, still struggling, but functioning. Apache had talked her through many dark nights these past months. Had shared resources, offered advice, mostly just listened. Apache. She came over with a smile. I didn't know you'd be here today. Every Saturday morning, Apache said. It's become part of my routine. Mrs. Rose told me there's an opening in her daycare, Rachel said. I applied. If I get in, I can go back to work part-time. That's great, Apache said sincerely. Mrs. Rose is amazing. Maya loves her. They talked for a few minutes about daycare and work schedules and the tiny victories of single parenting. Then Rachel went to help pack meal bags and Apache continued with his vegetables. Margaret appeared at his elbow. I have something for you. She pulled out an envelope from her apron pocket. Apache wiped his hands and opened it. Inside was a check. Not huge, but more money than he'd seen in one place in a long time. What is this? It's from the emergency fund we keep for families in crisis. The board voted to give you a grant. For all you've been through, for getting back on your feet and for giving back to the community, use it however you need. Pay off some bills. Buy Maya some clothes. Save it for a rainy day. Whatever helps. Apache stared at the check, his eyes getting watery. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You've earned it. Margaret squeezed his arm. I'm proud of you, Apache. You've come so far. After she walked away, Apache tucked the check in his pocket and took a moment to breathe. 6 months ago, he'd been sitting in a dark apartment ready to give up. Now he was standing in a bright kitchen helping others, holding his healthy daughter. Life was still hard. Money was still tight. Grief still hit him at unexpected moments. But he was okay. They were okay. At lunch, the volunteers sat together eating the same meals they'd prepared for distribution. Apache sat with Maya on his lap, feeding her mashed sweet potatoes. She made a mess, getting it all over her face and his shirt. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. Linda sat down next to him. She's gotten so big. I remember when Margaret first brought you here, Maya was so tiny. I know. It's crazy how fast they grow. Apache wiped Maya's face with a napkin. Sometimes I wish I could slow it down. Other times I think about all the milestones ahead and get excited. That's healing, Linda said gently, being able to look forward. When my husband first died, I couldn't imagine a future. Now I can. It's different than I planned, but it's still good. Apache nodded. That was exactly it. Different, but still good. After lunch, Apache helped clean up the kitchen. Maya had fallen asleep in her carrier, her head resting against his chest. The weight of her, the warmth, the trust she had in him. It still amazed Apache sometimes. He was her whole world. Her protector, provider, parent. The responsibility used to terrify him. Now it grounded him. Margaret caught him before he left. I want to talk to you about something. We're starting a new program. Peer support for grieving parents. People who've lost a spouse and are raising kids alone. I think you'd be perfect to help facilitate. Me? Facilitate? Apache felt uncertain. I'm not a counselor or anything. You don't need to be. You just need to be someone who understands, someone who's been there. Margaret's expression was earnest. Think about it. We'd train you. It would just be a few hours a month. But I think you could really help people. Apache thought about those first terrible weeks, how alone he'd felt, how much it meant when he finally found people who understood. Let me think about it. Of course. No pressure. Just know that I believe in you. Walking home with Maya, Apache thought about Margaret's offer. Could he really do that? Stand in front of other grieving parents and offer guidance? It seemed impossible. But then again, 6 months ago, everything seemed impossible. That evening, Apache's mother called. They talked regularly now. Apache had finally opened up to his family about how bad things had gotten. His mother had cried, wishing she'd known sooner, wishing she could have helped. But she'd also understood why he'd struggled to ask. "How's my grandbaby?" she asked. "She's perfect. Getting big. Starting to try to crawl?" Apache smiled, watching Maya on her playmat rocking back and forth on her hands and knees. "I'm coming to visit next month," his mother announced. "Booked my ticket today. 2 weeks. I want to meet her properly, hold her. Spoil her." "That would be great, Mom." Apache felt emotion rising in his throat. "Really great." After hanging up, Apache sat on the floor with Maya. She crawled over to him, still wobbly but determined. He scooped her up and held her close. "Your grandma's coming to meet you. You're going to love her." Maya grabbed his face with her chubby hands and Apache kissed her forehead. "Your mom would be so proud of you," he whispered. "You're strong and happy and perfect. She'd love watching you grow." The grief washed over him then, like it still did sometimes, but it was different now, softer, more like missing someone than drowning in loss. Apache let himself feel it, cry a little, then breathe through it. The grief would always be there. It was part of loving someone, but it didn't control him anymore. Later that night, after putting Maya to bed, Apache sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. He'd been writing letters to his wife, not sending them anywhere, just writing. Things he wished he could tell her. Updates about Maya, feelings he was working through. It helped somehow. "Dear love," he wrote. "Today I helped pack meals for families going through hard times. Remember how we always talked about volunteering together someday? Well, I'm doing it. I wish you were here doing it with me. But I think you'd be happy that I'm doing it anyway." He wrote about Maya's progress, about Rachel and how helping her made him feel useful, about Margaret's offer to facilitate the new support group. He wrote until his hand cramped and his eyes grew heavy. 3 weeks later, Apache stood in front of a small group of people. 8 parents who'd all lost spouses and were raising children alone. Some looked terrified. Some looked numb. All looked lost. Apache remembered that feeling so clearly. "Hi, I'm Apache," he started, his voice shaky. Maya was at home with Mrs. Rose. Margaret sat in the back, offering silent support. "My wife died 7 months ago, 3 months after our daughter was born. And I want to tell you that if you feel like you can't do this, like you won't survive this, I understand. Because I felt that way too.